these questions kind of go together. Connie Heidi, a teacher, says, as a teacher of a non-core area, I would like more details on how it will be determined, how and whether we deserve merit pay. And Lori Baxter, a teacher, asked, how will a related arts teacher earn merit pay?
Great questions. And let me tell you that when people ask me if we have listened regarding teacher evaluation, compensation models to teachers, this is a classic example where frankly we have, because I want to take you back in time, and I'll be very direct about where my position was a year ago, 15 months ago, and where it is today. About 15 months ago, we were engaged in this exercise called Race to the Top. Race to the Top was a process where a big policy issue, teacher-principal quality, was heavily debated, heavily discussed, part of our application process. When we went through that process, Indiana was like most other states. That is, we were all sitting in rooms with consultants, and we were trying to win a competition. And so what would happen is we would be in a hotel in Washington, D.C. There were 7 other states in that hotel with us. And as we heard that Florida was going to use 42% of their student performance data on teacher evaluations, you would see Louisiana, Rhode Island, Indiana, Illinois say, well, if they're 42, we got to get to 43. And if they're 43, we've got to get to 44. And it really, ladies and gentlemen, it became the eBay of teacher evaluations. We were auctioning how to do this. And that is not the issue. The issue was, from that, if you take a look at state legislation across the country, you saw a lot of states, Colorado, Illinois, Louisiana, Florida, passing legislation that said the state, those respective states, will develop teacher evaluation instruments and compensation models. When we left Race to the Top, to fast forward that, and we began meeting with teachers after that process, one of the things we realized is that the state can't do that for all teachers. It's really an impossibility. So what we said was, the federal government said, let's take this idea and let's make the 50 states responsible. And we said, that's not sustainable. You can't do that. So what we are recommending is for the state to set guidelines, guardrails, multiple measures, and we want you at the local level to do that. You tell us what makes a great art teacher. You tell us what makes a great ag teacher. You tell us what does those things and what metrics we would use. Because, frankly, the folks in Eastbrook may have a great model to evaluate an ag teacher, and the folks from Lebanon may not. And what we want the state to then do is become a clearinghouse for best practices. So every time I'm asked, how will this group receive performance-based evaluations, how will this group receive performance-based compensation, we keep going back to the fact, one of the things we've changed very drastically is the fact that these tools and these models will be developed at the local level. Okay, so we're going to rely on your expertise in many ways. Now, the state will provide a model. You're not responsible for following it. There is a model, but again, what we're looking for is annual evaluations. We're looking for, data used in those evaluations. There are 4 performance categories. There's a good reason there are 4 performance categories. Those performance categories will not be distributed along fixed percentages, so there won't be 25% in each category. There won't be a bell-shaped curve, okay? And we want you to develop those things.
And I'll go a step further. When we started talking about this, I had some real reservations because of the very issue the question brings up. How do you evaluate an effective art teacher? I mean, we're not testing on that. Obviously, the country's obsessed with testing. And I will tell you, the place that I keep telling DOE, I really like this model. There's a model out there called TAP, and it's the Center for Education Leadership at the University of Indianapolis, has spent an extensive amount of time researching TAP, and I would suggest all of you Google TAP and look at it, but it has been a model of evaluation that has been used and recognized to be effective. What they do in TAP is they take your peers are evaluating each one of you educators. So you've got an art, if you have an art educator, you would have somebody who had a peer in art is trained to be an effective evaluator. So significant training goes into that. They know what to look for in trying to evaluate an effective art teacher. And they really have done a very good job of mastering that. And in fact, TAP is recognized, I don't know, Tony didn't mention this, but I think the Fed had a $30 million grant that the Department of Education was successful in getting. And today in Indiana, we have 44 schools who are going to be piloting TAP. And they're using it. It's the merit pay model. They will be using TAP. In that model, 75% of the teachers in each one of those schools has to agree to be involved in this pilot. So it is something, and I would suggest, and believe me, TAP's not the only model. I know Colorado, there are several out there, but I know having been a little bit more educated on TAP, I feel very comfortable that TAP is an effective way to look at evaluating teachers.
And I would also say Steve Edwards is here from Marion, and I know Marion High School has actually voted to utilize the TAP program, and as Bob mentioned, it was part of our Teacher Incentive Fund grant. It was the backbone.
In fact, he says all 7 of the Marion schools are going to be using the TAP. So it is something, and like I said, it takes 75% of teachers to agree to it, so it's not being forced on, but it is a good model, I think, to look at, and it's not the only one out there, but I would at least suggest you look at that.
I'm going to